You and I, Verse, Volume 1, The True History of Jesus, featuring Salim Little, George Hopkins, Norman MacDonald, Kevin Lomax, Shever Thompson, and Imhotep Shabazz. Published by Mitanni Publishing, LLC, copyright 2021, Mitanni Publishing, LLC. All rights reserved. This book, or any portion thereof, may not be reproduced or used in any manner whatsoever, without the express written permission of the publisher, except for the use of brief quotations in a book review. Dedication. The Seekers. Forward. When I look at the universe, sun, moon, and stars, I see something that is missing in humanity. That element, which is null and void, would provide a blueprint for us to follow that would propel the human families in the immediate direction of success. That which I recognize in the universe can be found the word itself. Let me establish, before I proceed, that the physical universe that we all see, live in, and submit to consist of the sun, moon, stars, and all that exist in between. The term universe is made up of a prefix, uni, and a single word, verse. Prefix means before, and uni means one, while verse is another term for word. Now, when you look at the word universe, as a sum of its parts you have one word, and that one word is to be. Be means to exist. In a form of I study life around me, Islam, the universe was set in place to remind us to become one, and slash or exist as one under the banner of Islam. Upon further investigation, I was able to dissect the word even further, by breaking it down into sections and manifesting a paralleling between us and that which seems to be out of this world, in a manner of speaking. So, when I essayed the word universe, I came up with you and I verse, meaning you and I verse or verses, and it added much more substance to the above said meaning, where you and I must become one. We have to unite in order to exist, and verse the devil's uncivilized and wicked machinations, both mentally and physically. George Hopkins. Preface. Mitanni Publishing is proud to present the first installment in the UNI Verse series. UNI Verse is a platform for all seekers to share wisdom with the world. It is a series where writers from all religions, schools of thought, and walks of life come together to discuss differences and similarities in order to shed light on and build upon common points of interest that may lead to universal balance and harmony. This series is intended to unify the human family and realign all with the cosmic symphony that man's ego and pride has disrupted. In Volume 1 of the series, we will be exploring the often enigmatic character known as Jesus, Messiah, Christ, Yeshua, Isa ibn Maryam, and countless other names and epithets. One of the most monumental figures in human history, Jesus' life and teachings has been shrouded in mystery and confusion, while still supplying ample light in regards to the distorted representations of his true teachings or gospel, Injeel. Amidst the confusion of his life and death and alleged crucifixion, the true teachings of Jesus have succumbed to the degeneration of time, and yet and still, the little that remains has been enough to transform the lives of the poor and destitute, the forlorn monk, the debased drug addict, and countless other lives. The remnants of his teachings have inspired the innocent youth and the cunning man, the simpleton and the sage alike. This fact alone should attest to the greatness of his gospel, Injeel, for if fractions of his teachings have led to the spiritual transformation of many human souls, surely that which he brought to his disciples, opposers, and strangers through divine inspiration must have been even greater. Nonetheless, people from all walks of life share an affinity for the man and the myth, born to the Virgin Mary known as Jesus of Nazareth. Salim Little Supreme Wisdom. 21st letter in the English alphabet. U, or universe. When you wisdom speak your knowledge, You bring forth understanding, which is the completion of your universe. The universe is everything, sun, moon, and stars. They are celestial bodies. When you and I verse, we bring about a more glorious and higher elevation of understanding. You must be a part to make something whole and strong, so it can't be destroyed by anything weak. You be me, I be you, and together we are one Allah. U and I verse all negativity. You are the universe because you are the producer of the sun, moon, and stars, the man, woman, and child. Supreme Wisdom, NGE, Nation of Gods and Earths. Now, around this time lived Jesus, a wise man, for he was a worker of amazing deeds and was a teacher of people who gladly accept the truth. He won over both many Jews and many Greeks. Pilate, when he heard him accused by the leading men among us, condemned him to the cross. But those who had first loved him did not cease doing so. To this day, the tribe of Christians named after him has not disappeared. Josephus, Exhibit A, Jesus of Nazareth, by Norman MacDonald. Without regard to the beliefs or claims of any individual or group, it cannot be denied that Jesus of Nazareth is one of, if not the most influential people in human history. Even if one chooses to delineate the current numbered year date without reference to before Christ or Anno Domini, and instead use BCE for before Common Era, the epoch that creates that distinctive starting point is unequivocally the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. Many other faith-based calendars are clearly in use in their respective communions. For example, the Hebrew and Muslims' calendars. However, all scientific, medical, political, and historical context is still with reference to the birth of Christ as its demarcation. Calendars and the indices of time are a very minor issue as compared to the identity of Jesus of Nazareth in the thinking and sincerely held beliefs of mankind. Sometimes to the degree of a life or death determination, or one's ability to live peacefully in a certain global region, is one's profession of religious belief, and in particular, the identification of Jesus of Nazareth. Misinterpretation of the tenets of any given faith walk, and in particular, who Jesus of Nazareth is or was, and what he represents to any given group has as its ultimate outcome in the historical strife, and in most cases armed conflict of parties of different beliefs. The question remains, is this in line with any of his teachings? The stated objective of this volume of UNIVERSE, Volume 1, Jesus, is an exposition of unity, versus the abject separation and hostility that has historically been treated with this subject. We need to revisit none of the specific historical examples of violent and lethal consequences of the difference of opinions on the identity of Jesus of Nazareth. There is no shortage of wrongdoing in the name, but we are left with the question of why a set of beliefs about the person or the divinity of Jesus has and is the cause of so much human suffering. Especially when his message was, as it has been recorded, of peace and love. In the Gospel accounts of the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, he speaks of loving one's neighbor more than oneself, and even to bless those who curse you. It remains a mystery how anyone of good conscience could interpret those ideas as kill or torture anyone who doesn't subscribe to the exact same conviction, or in the exact same building. It makes even less sense that a group would conceive of setting fire to the most visibly recognizable symbol of Jesus of Nazareth in such a location so as to intimidate another group of people, presumably others of the same faith, in the interest of some flavor of supremacy. Clearly, in the teachings of Jesus, he was clear that there were to be no divisions of supremacy among people. In his time, it was certainly a normal function of Roman and Jewish societies that there be a clearly defined social order, or caste. This attitude was never more evident than in the distinction between chosen and not chosen. Whether or not one considers oneself a Christian, the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, even if not taken as being of divine origin, make sense as they relate to how we accord one another and how we engender interpersonal relationships. A social order of human beings being necessary to our survival, the concept of forgiveness versus revenge, grudge-holding or vengefulness, is one that has physical as well as emotional benefits. The cumulative stress of negative and acrimonious attitudes creates in the human body the release of corticoid stress markers in the bloodstream that have injurious effects on cardiac and cerebral well-being. Simply stated, the dwelling upon of hatred, revenge, or angst has the cumulative effect of weakening your heart and mind to the point of fatal illnesses. The opposite is true of the old cliché, only the good die young. As any discussion or examination of the universal significance of the person or divinity of Jesus of Nazareth with respect to the cosmos, one would certainly have to direct any analysis into spiritual rather than temporal or secular aspects of his life and death. Various Eastern faiths, most especially the Shinto faith of Japan, invests in any animate or inanimate being a soul or spirit. Clearly, the beliefs of the Native American Indian do likewise, as geological features and animal life are indwelled with spiritual entities. Mankind, for thousands of years, has contemplated what is beyond our own sphere of habitable territory, and what are our stations and influences in the cosmos at large. As society becomes more and more aware of our effect on our planets, a logical discussion follows about what are the implications of what we represent in the grander scheme of the physical universe and beyond. That concept of beyond the physical universe is clearly the one of most challenging of queries that mankind has ever struggled with.
As members of what we strive to consider ourselves as an enlightened world society, the divisions that have been created with respect to the identity of Jesus of Nazareth, as well as numerous articles of faith, are counterintuitive and counterproductive to that end. It is not enough to walk a mile in a man's shoes, to empathize with his beliefs, much less respect them. It takes real effort and an open mind to go beyond our own historical and personal prejudices and grudges to appreciate another's sense of belief and place in the world or in the cosmos. There are many very positive and benevolent aspects of the democratic experiment that America has engendered, and the attitude of celebration of diversity of culture and diversity of opinion is at the very top of that list. To quote former U.S. President Barack Obama, "One has the right to one's own opinions, but has no right to his own facts." There is no shortage of Hollywood movies that expound on the theme of how mankind is doomed to mutually assured destruction if we cannot resolve our tendencies for violent conflict over petty difference in opinions or beliefs. To quote from a significant event in the earthly ministry of Jesus, as recorded in the Gospel account of St. John, he reached out to a woman who was in the culture of his society ritually unclean at a well in Samaria. Many believe that this was the beginning of his outreach to people of all faiths and stations in life, and not just to the chosen or elect. Without regard to what our spiritual beliefs are about the divinity or spiritual place of Jesus as either the Messiah or Christ, prophet or just a teacher, his example is not diminished by the interpretation of his identity. In a truly enlightened society, we learn ways to accord each other's differing views with respect and dignity. We can still engender compassion for someone who believes differently from us and engage in healthy and respectful dialogue that serves to bring us closer rather than creating and magnifying those divisions. In my belief, that is the qualifying value of any analysis of who or what Jesus of Nazareth stands for. Exhibit B. What is parthenogenesis? From the Greek parthenos, meaning virgin, plus genesis, or creation. Parthenogenesis is a natural form of asexual reproduction, in which growth and development of embryos occur without fertilization. In animals, parthenogenesis means development of an embryo from an unfertilized egg cell and is a component process of apomixis. Gynogenesis and pseudogamy are closely related phenomena in which a sperm cell or pollen initiates the development of the egg cell into an embryo but makes no genetic contribution to the embryo. The rest of the cytology and genetics of these phenomena are mostly identical to that of parthenogenesis. The word parthenogenesis is sometimes used inaccurately to describe the reproduction process in hermaphroditic species that can reproduce by themselves because they contain reproductive organs of both sexes in a single individual's body. However, these species still use fertilization, and hence the term parthenogenesis wouldn't be applicable. Parthenogenesis is a process that occurs naturally in many plants. Some invertebrate animal species, including nematodes, water fleas, some scorpions, aphids, some bees, some phasmida and parasitic wasps, and a few vertebrates, such as some fish, amphibians, reptiles, and very rarely birds. This type of reproduction has been induced artificially in a few species, including fish and amphibians. Normal egg cells form after meiosis and are haploid, with half as many chromosomes as their mother's body cells. Haploid individuals, however, are usually non-viable, and parthenogenetic offspring usually have the diploid chromosome number. Depending on the mechanism involved in restoring the diploid number of chromosomes, parthenogenetic offspring may have anywhere between all and half of the mother's alleles. The offspring having all of the mother's genetic material are called full clones, and those having only half are called half clones. Full clones are usually formed without meiosis. If meiosis occurs, the offspring will get only a fraction of the mother's alleles. Parthenogenetic offspring in species that use either the XY or the X0 sex determination system have two X chromosomes and are female. In species that use the ZW sex determination system, they have either two Z chromosomes male or two W chromosomes, mostly non-viable but rarely a female, or they could have one Z and one W chromosome, female. Glossary. Parthenogenesis. Reproduction from an ovum without fertilization, especially as a normal process in some invertebrates and lower plants. Asexual. Of reproduction, not involving the fusion of gametes. Apomixes. Asexual reproduction in plants, in particular agamospermy, often contrasted with amphimixis. Gynogenesis. A form of parthenogenesis is a system of asexual reproduction that requires the presence of sperm without the actual contribution of its DNA for completion. Pseudogamy refers to aspects of reproduction. It has different, but related, meanings in zoology and in botany. Cytology, the branch of biology concerned with the structure and function of plant and animal cells. Meiosis, a type of cell division that results in 4 daughter cells, each with half the number of chromosomes of the parent cell, as in the production of gametes and plant spores. Compare with mitosis. Haploid of a cell, or nucleus, having a single set of unpaired chromosomes. Compare with diploid. Exhibit C. Parthenogenesis. B. And it is, by Imhotep Shabazz. Jesus' first and most profound miracle was his birth to his virginal mother. It is now known that female wasps, fish, birds, and lizards can produce healthy offspring without sexual intercourse or external fertilization. But what about humans? Are natural human virgin births possible? Scientists say, yes. In theory, a number of extraordinary events would have to occur in close succession, and the chances of these all happening in real life are practically zero, however. Not impossible, but practically impossible. A practicality is in no way an impossibility, however, and surely the one who creates and maintains the laws of gravity, physics, magnetism, and childbirth is capable of shifting them to suit His Majesty. Allah says in the Quran of Jesus' birth, "The similitude of Jesus before Allah is as that of Adam. He created him from dust, then said to him, 'Be,' and he was." Surah 359. To shift the laws of nature to make way for a new creation or the adaptation and evolution of a creature is in no way difficult for that which brought an entire universe into existence from nothing. However, for those who have monitored nothing but the fixed laws of nature, it is hard to perceive the bending and adjusting of the laws of physics without imagining catastrophe because of the fine-tuning of the universe. Back to science. Scientists say, for a virgin to get pregnant, One of her eggs would have to produce, on its own, the biochemical changes indicative of fertilization, and then divide abnormally to compensate for the lack of sperm DNA. These two events occur in the eggs or egg precursor cells of 1 out of every few thousand women. The egg would also need to be carrying at least 2 specific genetic deletions to produce a viable offspring. An egg will only start dividing once it senses a spike in cellular calcium. This typically takes place as a result of a sperm's entry to the egg during fertilization. But if the egg happens to experience a spontaneous calcium spike, it will start reacting as if it's been fertilized. A defective sperm that lacks DNA can produce a spurious calcium spike. In the lab, scientists can coax unfertilized eggs into beginning the post-fertilization process by simply injecting them with calcium. Are you a more difficult creation? Or is the heaven Allah constructed it? Surah 79-27. Once fertilization occurs, an egg can complete the final stage of a cell division known as meiosis II, during which it loses half of its genetic material to make room for the sperm's DNA. If there is no sperm, however, as is considered to be the case with Jesus, then each half of the divided egg cell will end up short, and both will die. In order for our immaculate conception to advance, the fertilized egg must, therefore, not complete meiosis. Both the calcium spike and the division mistake could occur as the result of random dysfunctions or genetic defects. Assuming they do, the egg cell may then begin the process of parthenogenesis, or virginal development. When this happens to an egg precursor cell, it can give rise to a tumor made up of many different types of tissue: liver, teeth, eye, and hair, for example. That is Jesus, the Son of Mary, the word of truth about which they are in dispute. It is not befitting for Allah to take a son, exalted is He. When He decrees an affair, He only says to it, "Be," and it is. Surah 19:34-35. Parthenogenesis in humans never produces sustainable embryos, however, because unfertilized eggs lack specific instructions about gene expression from the sperm. In general, our cells have 2 functional copies of each gene, one inherited from the mother and one from the father. For some genes, however, only one copy is ever used, while the other remains dormant. Some of the signals for which copies should be turned off come from the sperm cell. So, if there's no sperm, certain genes will be overexpressed, and the embryo will die when it is only about 5 days old.